What's the one moment in your life you still can't explain, even though you've replayed it in your head 1,000 times? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. I was sitting in class, 8th grade, and had this overwhelming emotion sweep over me. I started bawling and was sent to the office. I called my mom to come and pick me up, and she agreed because I never missed school and never caused trouble. My dad had been really sick for almost my entire life, so I just went home and I crawled in bed next to him and watched our usual World War II documentary, and we both fell asleep. I woke up a few hours later holding his hand and turned to look at my dad, and I knew he was dead. I sat there for a few minutes in absolute shock before going out to tell my mom. All these years later, I can't explain what came over me sitting in class, but I knew I had to go home, and nothing was going to stop me from being next to my daddy that day. Answer: I had a similar experience with my cat as a teenager. I had emotionally harmful behavior and absent parents, so my cat was the only living thing whom I got some warmth from, and we were each other's favorites. My sister was studying abroad for a semester, so my parents and I visited her for a week. On the last day around noon, we were visiting a botanical garden, and am suddenly inexplicably overwhelmed with sadness and longing to go home. I went to sit on a bench, listened to some music, and it passed. I still remember not understanding what happened to me. When we arrived at the airport after our flight back home that evening, my dad got a phone call from our neighbor telling our cat got ran over that day and passed. It was only a few days later that I realized that the timing of the accident and my inexplicable sadness had the same timing. 15 years later, I am still wondering if it was a mere coincidence or if my cat and I had bonded that strongly that my unconscious knew of his passing. Story 2. No one ever believes me, but here goes. When I was in college, I shared a room with a friend of mine from high school. One night I was sleeping and had a dream where he and I were on this huge pile of garbage, searching for something. We were both digging in the trash. Then I woke up. I got up and went to the bathroom. When I climbed back in bed, my roommate kind of stirred and mumbled, "I found it. It's over here," and then rolled over and went quiet again. The next morning, he didn't remember any of it. I didn't dream getting out of bed. I didn't dream his response. Answer: I had a roommate in college who talked in her sleep most nights. I do it from time to time, but usually only if I'm sick or influenced in some way. A few times, I would wake up in the middle of saying a sentence and I'd hear her respond. I realized we were speaking to each other in our sleep. I don't recall anything about my dreams then, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were incorporating each other into our dreams via conversation. I bet that's what happened to you. Story 3. I found a handprint in one of my bathroom rugs. I lived by myself and had no visitors. Plus, my hand was too small for the handprint in the rug. Answer: ooh, I have a mystery handprint story too. Summer before sophomore year of high school, me and a couple of friends were dipping our feet in the local haunted lake in the middle of the night. Dead Native American princesses, lots of mysterious drownings, the usual legends. As we were getting out, one of my friends yelled, "What the fudge is that?" And what the fudge indeed, there was a wet handprint on the back of my shirt. I can swear up and down. Absolutely no one had touched me, and we all measured our hands against the handprint, and it was too large to be any of us kids. Story 4. There was one time when I was about 17 driving back home with some friends, and everything on the street, including in the car, went straight black. Almost like a power surge, but not a single piece of light was on for about a solid second. I get how it could happen outside of the car, but inside, all dash lights, the radio, and even the headlights turned off. It was strange. Answer: I have a similar funny experience that this reminded me of. I was doing some sketchy shoot with a friend, probably buying substances IDK, and she told me to turn my headlights off. When I did, the entire street lost power. Weird timing and coincidence, but I'll always remember the look on her face asking me what on earth I did to the rest of the lights. Story 5. This was in the early 90s when caller ID was still pretty new. My dad called. He was hours away with our church youth group. The number from where he was came up on the caller ID, and I glanced at it before answering. His voice was obviously distressed. He asked to talk to my mom. She wasn't home. He told me he'd call back. I couldn't shake the tone of his voice, and I knew something was wrong. When my mom returned, edited to add she came back about an hour after his call, I told her, "Hey, Dad called, and I think something's wrong. You need to call him." She went to the caller ID, and the number was gone. But I remembered it, literally one glance, and I just recited the number. She looked at me funny and called the number I gave her. It was a hospital. One of the kids on the youth trip drowned, and my dad needed my mom to go tell the kid's family. In all of the horror of the day, and days after that, one weird detail never left me. I do not have an eidetic memory. Something just in that moment stored it in my brain until my mom was home. Answer: We obviously still don't know very much about the brain. I believe that sometimes the brain decides to remember something because it knows it may be extremely important. This is probably what happened to you. It probably sensed the tone of your dad's voice and made that decision to allow you to remember the number when you normally otherwise wouldn't be able to. I don't believe the whole you only use 10 of your brain Bs, but I do think that because we really don't understand a lot about it, it has the potential to do weird things like this in certain situations. Story 6. My late wife, who had been recently diagnosed epileptic after a head injury, was taking a bath, and I had music cranking, Led Zeppelin's In My Time of Dying, when I heard her say, "Help, get in here." I ran there and found her face down in the tub, seizing, face underwater, and got her out. The part I cannot explain was how I heard her. The music was so loud that there was no possible way I could have heard her with my ears. To this day, I believe I heard her in my mind. Answer: I had an asthma attack start my sleep. I had fallen asleep in my recliner in the living room, and my husband was in our bedroom. He heard me call for help, and when he got there, I was seizing from lack of oxygen. I was flighted to a bigger hospital, stopped breathing mid-flight, and was intubated. I spent time in a medically induced coma. When I woke up and tried to piece things together, the part that didn't make sense was him hearing me. According to the ER doc, I wouldn't have had the breath or the ability to yell at all, but he heard me over the 2 TVs playing. We can't figure out how, and honestly just accept it was either some form of telepathy or a mystery we'll never solve. Story 7. My cousin, when he was on deployment, had a dream he was fishing with our grandpa, and that he said it was great to see him one last time before he left. As soon as he woke up, he called his mommy aunt, who was taking care of him, and he passed away just minutes before he called. Answer: something similar happened to my dad. When he was in the Army, he had a dream where he was walking in the woods and came across a log cabin. When he knocked on the door, someone who he had never seen before opened the door and told him his grandfather was dead. When he woke up the next day, he got a call from his family with the news that his grandfather passed. Story 8. According to my sister, our mother was typing on her computer, managed to delete the entire hard drive. Story 9. One time when I was 7 or 8, I lost this ring my grandma gave me. She hadn't passed, but just lived far, and I missed her badly. So when I lost it, I was basically hysterical. Searched all day and cried myself to sleep when I couldn't find it. The next day, I found it perfectly placed on my bedside table. Obviously, I was overjoyed and thanked my parents for finding it, but neither of them had, and told me it would have been my brothers. Neither of my brothers were the ones who found it, and I strongly doubt they would have bothered to look. Everyone fell asleep before me, and I was a light enough sleeper that I would have noticed someone coming into my bedroom to look. Even if it had been my parents, they had no reason to lie or to not tell me where they had found it. I never figured out who returned it to me, but I still have it. Answer: I once an earring that I really loved. I wore it everywhere for years. We looked so many places for it. We combed through the park where we had been in our home, never found it. A few months later, my father suddenly dies. He was one of my best friends. I adored him. One day, several months after he'd passed away, my husband found my earring on our patio on the ground. It had been more than a year, and we had repeatedly looked all over the patio for it. It was also like someone just placed it there for us to find. I like to think it was my dad telling me he loved me by finding my missing earring. Story 10. I posted this yesterday in another thread, but I think it fits here, so I leave it here a second time. This happened a few years ago when I was working night shifts at a bakery. I used to walk to work through a wooded path that opened into a wide lawn. One night, I noticed a small, flickering light in the distance. Curious, I stepped off the main path and crossed the grass toward it. When I got closer, I saw what it was. In the middle of the field was a miniature dollhouse with candles burning inside, lighting up the tiny windows. I stood there for a moment, confused, unsure what to make of it, especially since those candles don't burn forever, you know. I looked around but did not see anyone. Eventually, I turned around and continued to work, but that image has stuck with me since. Nothing too crazy happened. It's just that I still have no idea how it got there or why it was there. Just weird. Answer: that reminds me of once I was going camping after I got off work. I had a particular place in mind up on the mountain outside of town. I get there and no one is there, but there's a fire going with fresh wood on the fire and a nice stack of wood right next to it. It was a place where I should have been able to see someone if they were remotely close by, and if they weren't, they shouldn't have left a fire unattended. I also didn't see anyone leaving the area as I was heading up. I ended up just camping next to the fire, but now years later, it does seem spooky and like a questionable decision to stay there. Story 11. I was driving from Milwaukee to the Wisconsin Dells, and near Sun Prairie, a good 50 men from home, we passed a very distinct car shoot old Toyota, windows down, driver didn't have a shirt, dog in the back seat. We then realized we forgot something really important, so had to head home and grab it. Then, near Sun Prairie, the second time though, we passed the exact same car in almost the exact same spot. There was no mistaking this vehicle, the driver, the dog. All the same, almost 2 hours later, my wife and I still talk about it. Answer: that happened to me once. Honestly, just a wholesome story. Myself and another motorist were driving very distinct vehicles, him in a purple Jeep and me in a Plymouth Reliant. Saw him at 9 a.m. on my way to work when he gave me a thumbs up, and then 8 hours later on my way home, I saw him again at the same intersection. He excitedly waved at me, and I waved back, and then I went on my way. Millions of people in that city, and we happened to cross paths twice that day. Story 12. I witnessed a traffic collision where a vehicle ultimately exploded, but I witnessed someone get out from the passenger side and walk off to the side of the road. It was a solo occupant who perished in the explosion. Story 13. Almost crashed my car coming up to a red light on ice. Swerved through moving traffic as it turned green and didn't hit anyone. Made it past like 15 cars through 2 lanes. Barely any control, just pure dumb luck. Answer: I hit a patch of black ice coming down the west side of the Eisenhower Tunnel on 70 into Dillon CO center lane, spun out a full 360 degrees with my entire family in the car. I look in the rear view and one car behind me avoids me easily, but a second hits the black ice as well and starts spinning out of control right towards us. Somehow he slid perpendicular between my car and the other one. We made eye contact. He hit neither of us and just kept sliding like 10 more yards down the road before stopping. That was like 3 years ago, and my heart starts racing every time I approach that area of road now. I still don't understand how he didn't go through the back of us. Story 14. How the Tooth Fairy managed to make the exchange. When I was at the point of working out it was Mom and Dad, I conducted an experiment to prove the Tooth Fairy wasn't real. I had just lost a tooth, and although they knew, it was the middle of the day, and traditionally the tooth goes under the pillow at night. We were going out somewhere, and so I placed it in a glass on the windowsill. I was the last one out of the house. They were backing down the driveway when I ran out. I was the first one in the house upon return because I wanted to see the tooth to prove that the Tooth Fairy wasn't real. Well, fudge me, there was 2 in that glass. Answer: I have a similar story. When I was younger, I conducted an experiment to prove to myself that Santa was real. I thought I knew in my heart of hearts, but I wanted to test my theory empirically. It was my belief that Santa could read your mind since it helps him make the naughty or nice list. So I decided on Christmas Eve that out of the 8 cookies placed on the mantle, if the blue cookie had only 1 bite out of it while all the tiebreaker were eaten, then Santa was real without a doubt. So come morning, I go downstairs and see the platter with only 1 cookie left. The blue one with just a few nibbles taken out. This cemented that Santa was real in my mind, and I explained to my parents why I knew so that morning. I don't know how only that cookie with those conditions was left, as I didn't tell a soul, but it had me a believer for a long time past where it should have, haha. Story 15. I swear I'm not making this up, but I once saw someone who looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same bag, everything. Walk out of a store that I was literally about to enter. We locked eyes for half a second, and then they just turned the corner and vanished. My mom was with me, and she saw him too. Still bothers me to this day. Answer: I used to have friends tell me they saw me places that I wasn't. Some said they would call my name and I'll just walk right by them like I didn't hear them. Later on, I was at an event at my favorite bar bowling alley. There was a bunch of bands playing a show and artists selling their stuff. I was having a drink, chatting with some friends, when someone that looked exactly like me walked by. Immediately, I'm like, what is going on? And one of my friends says, oh yeah, that's the guy that looks like you. He was one of the vendors at the show. I talked to him for a bit, checked out his art and stuff. Weirdest part is he was making art that was eerily similar to mine. Anyway, found out from other people that he was kind of a jerk. So I'm not the evil twin, I guess. Story 16. My wife, girlfriend at the time, and I were living in our first apartment. There was a strict no pet policy, but there was a stray cat living outside that she just had to bring in. One night, I was sitting on our bed, and the cat started clawing up the bedroom carpet where the bedroom door meets the hallway. My wife heard the sound and charged down the hallway from the living room, yelled at the cat, and just as she came into my view in the doorframe, she raised her hands to clap to scare the cat, but she didn't clap. I watched her hands stop midair. The cat ran off, so she stopped mid-clapping motion. A split second later, about the time it would have taken for her hands to connect for a clap, there was a loud, unmistakable clap sound that reverberated through the hallway. We both heard it and froze. She immediately looked at me pale-faced with a terrified look. I didn't clap. This was almost 20 years ago, and the thought still gives me chills. Answer reminds me of my story. I lived in an old Victorian built in 1862 with an ex once. We are both women, and it was just the two of us living there. It was a shotgun-style house, so the bathroom was all the way at the other end of the house, and you had to pass all the rooms and kitchen to get there. We woke up one morning. It was a quiet street and morning, and she went to the bathroom but kept the door open, and I went into the living room near the front door. All of a sudden, clear as a bell and very loud, I hear a man's voice say, "Look what we have here," right in front of my face, basically. I was shocked and didn't say anything back, and my ex said, "What was that? Or did you say something?" Because she heard it too, all the way from the other end of the house. I told her no and explained what happened when she came back. To this day, it's one of the weirdest, clear as day mysteries I have experienced. There was no TV on, and neither of us were using our phones or even had them on us at the time since we literally just woke up. Can't explain it. Story 17. When I was a kid, I had a toy tank type thing that shot plastic missiles. One time I shot a missile out of it and it just vanished. I saw it fly the general direction it was pointed, but kind of glanced away for a split second and it was gone. It was absolutely nowhere to be seen. The floor was completely free of clutter and there wasn't any furniture for it to go under. It was bright yellow and usually really easy to find. I spent ages searching for it and even drafted my mom in to help, but we couldn't find it and we never did. Answer. I moved into a house that had been used as a rental for years, and there were many odd things underneath the kitchen cupboards. To get to them, I had to unscrew the toe kick and take it out, which I planned on doing because I was painting it. I'm sure nobody else unscrewed that, removed it, and put 2 fat plastic coat hangers and several children's toys underneath it. I bet to them they just disappeared. To me, it's a puzzle how they got there. Really, how could they have gotten there? Weird. Story 18. One time I randomly met a childhood friend on the other side of the world. Still blows my mind how that happened. Answer, I switched schools in 8th grade, but lived in the same town. The year after the switch, my family went on vacation to Disney World. While in line for the Tower of Terror, I heard a voice, turned around, and it was one of my former classmates. Said, "Hey," caught up briefly. Neither of us lived in Florida, just happened to be on vacation with family and in line at the same time. I haven't seen him since. Story 19. In September 23, I took the wrong exit off of the highway on my way to a friend's graduation party. I was driving alone and ended up by a massive hospital that was about an hour away from my home. At the time, I was concerned for my mother's well-being as I was letting her use my car occasionally, but I was unsure if she should be driving. I imagined visiting my mother there half dead after a car accident. I was literally tearing up thinking about it and disgusted at myself for this horrible, morbid, intrusive thought. I returned home from the after party at like 3-4 a.m. My mom was up very early getting ready to do her prayers before heading to church. She used to get there super early before 6 a.m. I gave her my car keys. I go to bed. I wake up gasping, literally panicked for no obvious reason. My phone is ringing. It woke me up. I scramble to pick it up, and before I see it, I'm already certain that it is my mom. Even though she should not have been calling at that hour, she would have been in church. Driving in the dark to the church, she totaled the car and was hospitalized and badly injured. I asked her which hospital, and she didn't know. She woke up dazed in a hospital bed, confused. But I was certain she was at the specific hospital. Mind you, there are at least 4 other hospitals closer by. And of course she was. I was terrified that she would die. I thought it was too coincidental. I predicted the whole event not 6 hours before, even the way I panicked waking up before I knew what was wrong. But she did not. She healed well. She stayed in the hospital for a month. In hindsight, this was all just intuition screaming at me to wake up. She was diagnosed with dementia 3 months later. Story 20. Oh my God, finally I have somewhere to share this. 2 years ago, I was watching a movie on the couch with my husband and fell asleep next to him. I can hear in my sleep a loud, almost train sound and wake up to him nudging me saying, "Listen, do you hear that?" I have never heard anything like this near our house. It sounded almost like a train literally going over our house, but it was so incredibly loud and didn't fade out. It lasted for at least 2 minutes straight. We live in a fairly rural neighborhood and there's train tracks about a mile away, but this isn't what it sounded like. It was so loud, it felt like it was shaking the house. We could never figure out WTF it was. It couldn't have been a jet or anything because it went on for so long. It couldn't have been a truck. We thought through every possible thing it could have been, and nothing fit. We were so stunned and freaked out that we couldn't even move or say anything the entire time. but I wish we had gone outside to see WTF it was. It was just so insanely loud that we were just stunned. Edit to add because I keep getting these suggestions. It wasn't a tornado. We don't really get tornadoes here, and on the rare occasion we do, it's major local news. Even when we do rarely get them, they're very small and rarely even fully touch down, and never have come up to the area where I live. When they happen, it's in the valley, and I live in a hillier area. There's a lot of mountains and hills in my part of the country. There's no way a tornado happened without it being headlining local news for days and causing major damage, since the houses and wires, etc., aren't built for that kind of weather. We lose power over the smallest of storms as well, so a tornado would have knocked out our power immediately. It wasn't an earthquake either. We also don't get those. Like a tornado, it would have been major local news. It wasn't any other major storm system weather event. This was in July 7 years ago. The weather had been hot but mild, no rain or wind, etc. Our electric sucks. At the time, we were losing power every other month from the most mild weather events. Any level of weather that would make that kind of noise would have knocked power out. There would have been other signs of extreme weather too, which there were none. I also cannot overstate just how loud this was. I've never heard anything like it. When I say train sound, that's the closest description, but still not entirely accurate. It was almost like an extremely loud horn, but IDK rougher. It was literally deafening. When I say we couldn't figure out what it wasn't without trying. We entertained every single possible idea and nothing fit. I'm not superstitious, and I'm very logical, so I needed to find a logical reason for this. It bothers me to no end that I couldn't figure it out. Story 21. I'm a paramedic in Louisiana. One morning I called into work. It was a Friday and I needed a 3-day weekend. My boss was super chill. She told me to enjoy myself. I had about an hour commute, and most days my girlfriend and I would carpool together. While she got dressed for her workday, I laid in bed and had this nagging voice in my head telling me I needed to go work. I pushed it off several times and it just kept getting louder. Go to work. I gave in and told her that I would be carpooling with her after all. Our commute is mostly on I-55, a bridge in the swamp that doesn't have much traffic. It doesn't have a shoulder, just enough room for a car to pull over, and a wall to keep you from driving over the side into the water. There's only an exit every 7 to 10 miles. Northbound side is its own bridge, and southbound is its own. We're about 20 minutes into our commute and I'm speeding. The speed limit is 70 miles per hour, but with how isolated it is, I usually drive around 85 miles. I'm in the fast lane, and I notice a van pulled over to the right. No hazard lights, just parked. It's not an odd thing to see. People are constantly breaking down in this area, running out of gas, mostly due to it being such a long stretch without an exit or gas station. So I see this van, and between the van and the wall, I notice someone doing CPR. I quickly pull over and tell my girlfriend to call 911. I approach the van and tell the guy doing CPR I can help. He tells me his friend just got out of rehab and did some heroin. I assess the male on the ground. I feel a pulse, but he isn't breathing. I've worked many of overdoses in my career, but from the comfort of an ambulance. This day I had nothing. I gave this guy mouth-to-mouth for about 15 minutes until a police officer arrived with Narcan. By the time an ambulance arrived, he was awake and alert. Like I said, I've worked many overdoses. The thing that makes me replay this in my head is the voice telling me to get up. It was profound. If I would have never called into work and went for my normal time, it would have been hours before and he would be dead. If I wouldn't have listened to that voice, he would be dead. Something spoke to me. I don't know what it is, but I wish it would speak to me more. I wish every day I could hear that voice again. Story 22. In somewhat 2006-2010, we had weirdly orange day in Siberia. Like sun was orange, sunlight was orange. It was so weird I thought it was the end of the world. It was not a dream. Like in some kind of Truman Show, top lamps were improperly configured with too much orange tint. Story 23. I'm not particularly a believer in the paranormal or stuff like I'm about to write, but here goes. When I was about 6, my parents were going to a concert. Felicia came over to babysit my and my 11-year-old sister. We were in the completely dark house watching The Bodyguard when I looked over and saw my dad in the doorway down the hall. Same outfit he left in, but he had a black eye. I turned to Felicia and my sister to tell them, turned back, and he was gone. I explained what happened, and we were all so freaked out that we turned on the lights for the rest of the night. Fast forward to the morning. I get up and Dad is in the kitchen. He turns around and has a black eye. Some woman decked him and gave him a shiner. Felicia and my sister confirmed that I saw it the night before, and we were still all freaked out. Story 24. I was always home alone for an hour or two before my bus came, and the bus picked me up at the end of our long driveway. It never occurred to me to feel scared because, TBH, I was excited to watch cartoons and not be around my harmful behavior stepdad. One morning, I heard the distinct click of the basement door over the sound of the TV. I yelled out, "I haven't seen you. Please don't hurt me. I'll walk out the door right now. I won't tell anyone." I grabbed my backpack and ran out to the end of the driveway. It was near the end of the school year, so it was warm enough outside that the kitchen window was cracked open. From the end of the driveway, I could hear glasses and plates being thrown on the ground and shattering. I didn't mention it to anyone, and when I got home, there was no sign that anyone had been there. Nothing was broken or stolen. Story 25. When we bought our house, there was a basketball hoop in the driveway. The previous owner came and picked it up not long after we bought because we didn't want it. His son used to shoot ball on it. About 5 or 6 years later, my daughter told me one morning that someone was bouncing a basketball in the driveway during the night. Her bedroom is on the driveway side. Now, we live in the country. I only have a neighbor, and his house is quite far, and he is in his 70s. I told my daughter she must have been dreaming. Next morning, she told me again she heard a basketball bouncing. I thought it was strange, but forgot about it. About a month later, my neighbor told me the son of the previous owner died suddenly. I asked him when exactly. He told me, and it was pretty much exactly when my daughter heard the basketball. Never heard it before or since. Story 26. I every once in a while have very vivid deja vu. Places I've never been and situations I've never been in before happen in my dreams, and then it happens in real life. One specific one I remember was in high school. I had a dream I was standing in a group with people of different ages and races, and we were just waiting and talking. One person was sitting on an overturned white construction bucket, wearing shorts and white shoes. There was grass and a white object I couldn't place. Then the dream was over. A couple months later, we're at band camp. The people I'm with are my section mates. There were no instruments visible in the dream, but we were on a water break. You typically leave them somewhere else. They're all just talking and I'm listening, so I look down and there it is, my deja vu. One of the girls is sitting on a bucket. It's summer, so she had shorts on, and one of our props is laid out for use in a few moments, a white tarp. I immediately try to tell everyone I'm having a super crazy deja vu. We talk all the time on a field. No, it's exactly the same. Sure. This has happened a few times, and I usually just keep it to myself. Sometimes I wonder if I can predict the future. It's so accurate, but it's just too infrequent. Story 27. I tucked my son into bed. The light was out, but I could see from the hallway light. As I left the room, I stepped over the dark mass that is the dog. Like always, I drag my toes across his chest for petting him with my foot, and I hear his tail thumping the floor as he wags it. I close the door but a crack and head downstairs. I get to the bottom, and the dog is laying there in the dining room, thumping his tail at me. There's only one set of stairs in the house, and I was on it. Story 28. My husband and I were renovating a house built in 1924 to eventually move into. I was in the second-story bathroom when I heard him from the basement yell, "Hey, what are you doing?" I answered, "Painting the bathroom," thinking, duh, you know this as I've been in here a while. My husband immediately answered from across the house first floor in a completely different room. Yeah, okay. There was no one else in the house, and he was just as confused as I was when I asked him about it. Answer, not my store, but this exact thing happened to my younger cousin at my old house. She was around 6 at the time and was over because my mom was babysitting her. My cousin used the restroom, came out, and asked my mom if my uncle or my mom's BF was there. My mom said no. My cousin told her that while she was using the restroom, she heard a man's voice asking her, "What are you doing?" But a lot of weird stuff happened in that place. Story 29. One day, my mom picked me up from the kindergarten as usual. As soon as we got home, I went straight to the room I shared with my brother and turned the lights on. This was highly unusual behavior since it was still daytime, and we'd normally take our jackets and shoes off first. There was a small chandelier in the room with 3 incandescent light bulbs, each encased in a larger glass globe that diffuses the light. The moment I turned the switch on, every single one of those bulbs and globes exploded and shattered. Such bulbs would usually die due to the wolfram filament burning out, which would only cause the bulb to go dark and develop a singed spot. All these bulbs shattered with such force that they managed to also blow up the much thicker glass surrounding them. Thankfully, no one was in the room or got hurt. We kept the chandelier, and nothing like that happened since. 30 years later, I still can't explain what compelled me to do that, and I wonder whether it was some kind of instinct that helped prevent more serious consequences. Story 30. I really clicked with someone, and we kept having little romantic movie moments that were already inexplicable. But once I messaged her about a song I was listening to that related to our complicated situation, I received a message from her a few seconds later that she was driving home and she had to pull over to reply because the same song happened to be playing on her car radio. Story 31. I have this one specific memory of when I was in school, but it was a view of me from outside window. Story 32. During summer when school was out, I used to like to stay up late. In the middle of the night, one night I had to go to the bathroom. I heard my radio turn on while I was washing my hands. Couldn't have been my parents because if they had gotten up, they'd have to go right past the bathroom to get to the living room. So I go back out into the living room and my radio was blaring with no one around. What made it weirder was my boglin, a rubber monster puppet, was perched on top of the radio when it was nowhere near it when I left the room. Story 33. I was with my brother, mom, and girlfriend in my bedroom watching a movie. I don't really know why we were in there instead of the living room, but oh well. I got up to go get water from the kitchen and then started to return to the bedroom when I saw my girlfriend at the time run into the bathroom in the hallway. She didn't turn any of the lights on in the hall or bathroom, so I figured she was going to jump out at me when I walked by. I snuck up and tried to scare her in the bathroom, but nobody was in there. I turned the lights on and everything. I went to my bedroom and they were all there and even said they never left my room. I was 100% convinced I saw someone run into that bathroom. At a younger age, I was hiding under sheets from my brother that was coming to find me. When I put the sheets over my head, I saw a kid my age under the sheets with his eyes at the same level as mine, about a foot away from my face. I can't explain this because there was no room between the sheet and my face, but somehow there appeared to be a young boy under the sheets with me. His eyes appeared lifeless but intense at the same time. I remember screaming like a girl and freaking out almost into tears because it felt so real. I can picture both of these moments perfectly in my head, and they give me shivers. Story 34. One night in high school after a game, my dad opened the car door for me to get in the back seat, just like always. For whatever reason, I said, "You know what? I think I'll sit on the other side tonight." He laughed, we walked around the back of the car, and he let me in the other side instead. I have no idea why the urge struck me. It didn't feel like a voice in my head or a sense of impending doom, just a sudden whim. A bit odd since I was always extremely particular about sitting on the left side of the car. But hey, why not switch it up? About 10 minutes later, our car would be T-boned. I was badly injured, but if I had sat in my usual seat in the side I'd strongly preferred my entire life, there is zero chance I would have survived that accident. Answer. You know, it's interesting. My brother had a girlfriend, now his wife, who the family casually nicknamed Glue Stick because she had to go everywhere with him. Like, we pretty much never saw my brother on his own once they started dating. She had to be with him 247. I'm not even sure my brother gets bathroom breaks on his own, but one night he came over to visit, and for some reason, she just felt like staying home that night. Absolutely strange for her. That one night, a car ran a red and hit my brother's car as he was driving home. Thank God my brother was fine, but the front passenger seat was absolutely destroyed. I really don't believe there's any way she would have survived, not with the damage that was done. And just that one night, she felt not to go with him. Story 35. Vacationing with a group of friends and family in coastal North Carolina. Every day, my 7-year-old is loving the beach life and being in the water. One night at bedtime, he is inconsolable, absolutely unique experience, telling me no one can go in the water tomorrow. I remind him that we had plans for everyone to spend the day in town, and he is eventually able to sleep. Fast forward to the next evening when we return to the house for dinner, and the rescue helicopter is hovering just down the beach. Our host, a physician, goes to assist and returns to report that 2 youth visiting with their church group were caught in a riptide. One died on the beach, the other in hospital. I can't explain how my son knew to stay out of the water, and nothing similar has occurred before or since. Story 36. Just a coincidence. I lived on the east coast of USA. I bought this wall art, brought it home, hung it up, and noticed my first and middle name was the signature. I have an unusual name. It was surprising. 10 years, I live on the West Coast now. I'm waiting at my hairstylist, and this lady turns and says, "Is your name unusual name?" "That's me," I say. She asked my middle name, I tell her. "That's her name?" Crazy. So I tell her about the artwork. She's the artist. Story 37. My husband and I went to visit my mother-in-law one day. We had our son in a stroller and needed to change buses and go by trains in between. We had planned out a 20-minute wait at a station to be sure to have time for the connections. We had a pleasant wait. The station was quiet. The summer day not too hot or cold. The wind was soft and the sound slightly muffled or lazy. When we arrived at my mother-in-law's, the time was an hour later than we'd planned out. We tried to figure out what had happened by checking the timestamps on the tickets, but we could not find a logical explanation from the tickets. We'd lost an hour on that train station. Story 38. I had a personal Mandela effect. Like a year ago, I read that R. Kelly was released from prison early. I went to work and everyone was talking about how crazy it was that they were just letting him out like that. I brought it up the next day and was asked what the hell I was talking about, and when I looked it up, there was nothing about it whatsoever, just that he was still in prison. I'm 99, sure it wasn't a dream, and if it was indiscernible from real life. Answer: I vote for dream. Once and only once, and I'm 51, I had a dream that felt like it was part of my waking reality. It's been over a decade, and sometimes I still have to remind myself that I haven't ever been to space, despite that dream. I've never had any other difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy, and I enjoy a Walter Mitty level of fantasy. But that one dream did not feel like a dream. It was most definitely a dream. I also have never particularly wanted to go to space. Story 39. My best friend died of cancer in 2017. He and I always joked about show me something when you are in the afterlife. And he said if he could, he would. A few years later, I visited his grave on an afternoon in the weekend, and that evening just couldn't sleep. My boyfriend was already snoring and sleeping. I went downstairs to go to the toilet, and when I was done, I walked through my living room towards the stairs and couldn't help but feeling something. I turned around and a giant ball of light was floating through my living room. I was in shock, ran up the stairs, got in bed, and woke up my boyfriend. He could feel I was shaking, and I told him, I think I just saw my evidence of the afterlife. It's still something very emotional for me to share, and no matter what people may say, I cherish this memory. Answer: one of my best friends died in 2019. I took it his passing very hard naturally. A short while later, I had a dream, I guess. I was talking to him about my Super Bowl party, and he said he planned to be there. That's when it occurred to me he was dead. I said, you him, but you won't be there because you're dead. He looked at me and half chuckled and said, yeah, and smiled. I asked him, how is it being dead? He replied in a nonchalant way that he always did, it's all right. I opened my eyes. I was in my bathroom. I never dreamt about him since. I'm sure it was just a dream, but I'd like to think it was him telling me I'm okay. Love and miss you, Big Kev. Story 40. I was roughly 11. My grandmother was watching us as the snowstorm caused both my mom, who was with my grandfather, and my dad to get stuck in various locations on the way home. As I was trying to clear the driveway, I was all the way towards the bottom of this lengthy stretch. My grandmother told me later that she felt a massive urge to get me inside. She ran to the front door and told me to move. I've never heard my grandmother yell before or since, so luckily I moved. A massive branch fell right where I was, landing on top of the shovel I had left behind. That branch was heavy enough, it took 2 people to move later. I'm not sure what people believe in terms of gum or spirits or whatever, but that day sticks out to me as one I can't solve. Story 41. This one sounds absolutely insane, but here we are. When I was a little kid, like 6-ish, I had this bizarrely heavy but very tall and narrow chest of drawers, made of solid oak and weirdly top-heavy. One night my dad was reading me a book while sitting on my bed across the room, and I decided I needed something from the top of the dresser. I opened the bottom drawer and stepped up onto the folded clothes in the drawer to reach the top of the dresser, but the whole thing started to tip over. My dad and I both remember it the same way. The dresser was falling with me underneath it, and then I was sitting on the foot of the bed, which was a solid 5-6 feet away. There was no way that I could have jumped from where I was in the drawer onto the foot of the bed, and we both remember it being like a weird little skip from the dresser coming down on top of me, straight to me, sitting on the bed. Neither of us has any kind of explanation. My family still have the chest of drawers, but ever since then, they've been screwed to the wall, haha. Story 42. When I was in college, I liked to go to Five Guys for food before work. I was pretty routine, went about the same time, and always been to the bathroom right before I left on my way to work. The bathrooms were down a long hallway in the back and were each single-person bathrooms, one for each gender. The bathroom door had 2 locks, a handle lock, and a chain lock, which I always found somewhat odd. Anyways, one particular day I was there and the place was pretty dead. I'm going to the bathroom right before I heading to work, so I walk down the long hallways and try to open the bathroom door. It opens, but then it catches on the chain lock. I instantly let the door lock and said sorry. I stood there for a second thinking, who the fudge would only lock the door with the chain lock and not the handle? As I'm standing there, I don't hear anything. No response. No, why'd you open my door? Which I thought was odd. I really had to go, so I went ahead and knocked apprehensively. No answer. I started thinking, I wonder if some shoot-head little kid chain locked the door and then squeezed out just to screw with people. After another minute of hearing absolutely nothing, I slowly open the door again until it catches on the chain. I can see the toilet in the diagonal corner and the sink with a mirror in the corner closest to the door opening, which with the mirror allows me to see in the corner behind the door too. I don't see anyone at all, but I say hello. One more awkward time. Nothing. I can see 3 of the 4 corners in this tiny, brightly lit bathroom and have heard no responses. So I figure my guess on a kid locking the chain was right and decide to reach in and start trying to unchain the door so I can piss and get to work. Just as I'm reaching in, my whole arm now in the bathroom and reaching around the door, a goddamn hand reaches forward from the single corner I can't see and flushed the fudge toilet. I noped out of there so fudge fast, ran for the door, and didn't stop until I got to my car. I didn't go back to the Five Guys for a very long time. Who doesn't say something in that situation? Story 43. This one is weird because I am looking for a logical explanation, and yes, I can think of them, but the sound is so distinctive. I live in a 3-story townhouse, which is more than 100 years old. My good friend and landlord acquired the house around 2010, gutted it to nothing. Pipes, wires, everything gone and replaced with modern equipment. The 3 floors are 3 separate apartments, units, and I moved into the top floor after it was already occupied by tenants in the lower floors. Every night around 10, I hear my neighbor on the lower floors snap her deadbolt shut on her back door before bed. Fast forward a few years, the other tenants move out, and the other 2 units are empty for several months. Yet still I keep hearing the deadbolt in the floor below snap shut around 10, give or take 15 minutes. The units are empty, and I know this because I have the keys to the other units. Eventually the noise changes to around 11 p.m., but realize daylight savings time. I tell my friend about it and ask if he can think of anything mechanical that is in that part of the house, and can't think of anything mechanical over there. Later, my friend and I are watching TV in my apartment, and 10 rolls around. Klochunk. He says, was that just the deadbolt closing on the empty apartment you've been talking about? No ghost encounters or anything in this place for all the years I have lived, except that fudge noise. There are people that live there now. I want to ask them if they hear it, but don't want to be the crazy neighbor. I recorded it before by leaving an old iPhone next to my back door on voice memo. You can hear it, but it's not the same as in person. It will be that time of the night again soon. Maybe I'll try again. Story 44. I should preface this by saying that I've never experienced any other hallucinations or extreme paranoia to my knowledge. I had a late lecture ending around 7 p.m., dead of winter, so it was dark out already. Had to get the train back, and the underground station I needed was at the back of a little shopping mall type area, very brightly lit. Now I normally walk with my head down, as I'm a pretty awkward person socially, but I glanced up and noticed at least 3 people in different directions staring at me. I didn't look particularly strange or out of place or anything, so I couldn't think of any reason why people would be staring. As I was wondering, I swear to God, every single head in that area turned to look at me almost simultaneously. At least 20 people. Creepiest shoot ever. I panicked and ran into a nearby stairwell to calm down and found a dude in there sitting on a bright orange blanket who seemed to gesture at me to come closer while grinning. Decided fudge that, I've had enough, and just ran as fast as I could to get on the next train ASAP. I definitely wasn't dreaming, and the only conclusion I can come to is that the whole thing was some kind of delusion, but I've never experienced any other hallucination in my life, so it still keeps me up to this day. My mental health was low at the time, going through pretty rough depression, but I don't see how that would create an experience like that. I guess I'll never know. Story 45. Shared this here a few times. While in college, I was working alone at a retail store in a shopping mall. I had closed shop for the day, and I was the only person in the store. I took some stuff to the stock back room, which also had a small card table with 4 chairs around it for meal breaks. I returned to the front of the store to continue closing up. I was out there for like 10 minutes, then went to the back room to get my coat. When I stepped into the back room, all 4 of the chairs were facing the door in a perfectly straight line, several feet from where they should be at the table. These fudge chairs had moved and changed directions silently with no one else but me there. I noped the fudge out, called mall security. They searched the store and found it empty. They said I probably moved the chairs and forgot. I never worked there alone again. Story 46. My unconscious grandma somehow waited for all of her kids and grandkids to show up before she passed. This was before cell phones, so there was no planning or group text. We just drifted in from different parts of town. A few of us had a reason to stop by, but most of us just felt like visiting her that day. We all knew she was getting close, so people were checking in more often, but the timing was still wild. Everyone was there to say goodbye and to be there for each other. I'm agnostic, and I still chalk it up to coincidence, but that moment always sticks with me and makes me wonder if there's more going on than we understand. Answer: I'm an ICU nurse and have seen it enough that it does seem like people have slight control over when they pass when they're close. The story of grandma going as soon as the room was empty for 30 seconds is really common. I even remember a time when the wife told her husband it was okay to go, and he just up and did right then. Crazy, but I saw it happen. Story 47. This is a crazy story, but I was not the only one that experienced it, and I still can't explain it to this day. When I was a teen one night, I had a really weird dream and woke up from it around dawn, except I woke up in my best friend's room instead of my own room, in a bed next to her sleeping. I was confused and dazed once I realized where I was and that this was not where I went to sleep the night before. I noticed her phone was in the bed charging next to me, and I tried to turn on the screen to take a look at the time, but I was unable to as it seemingly glitched and shut down. I wanted to try to wake her up, but then I heard steps approaching her room, and not knowing what to do, I laid back down and covered myself over the head with a blanket. It's important to note here that my friend shared a bunk bed with her sister at the time, and she was in the top bunk with wooden railing around the bed, so it was hard to see into her top bunk from the ground. Someone opened her bedroom doors, walked to her closet near the bed, and from the sound of it took some stuff out and left the room after about a minute. While I was laying down and waiting for them to leave, I noticed that I was actually laying on my friend's arm, and she started moving in her sleep. I was still freaking out and decided to lift the blanket after whoever was in her room left. The next thing I know, I lifted the blanket and opened my eyes, and I was back in my own room in my own bed. I went over to my friend the same day and told her what happened, and she freaked out as well, and told me that she suddenly got woken up very early that morning and felt that her arm was asleep even though she was not laying on it. She also noticed that her phone was off and acting weird when she unplugged it from the charger, even though it was on when she fell asleep. I mentioned the person in her room. She said that her mom was getting ready for her morning shift and would usually enter her bedroom to get her clothes, as the big closet in the room was a shared closet. It's been years since, and both of us are still weirded out and tried to find any logical explanation to our overlapping experiences. Story 48. I used to go off-roading a bunch years ago way in the bush in Alberta. I had disconnects for my front sway bar in my Jeep to make the ride smoother. Well, me and two other Jeeps went for the day and got back to the staging area late in the day. We were putting air back in our tires, cleaning some dirt off lights, etc. I went to put my disconnect kit back on, but the main hookup got loose. Between 3 Jeeps of tools, we couldn't find a single way to get it right again, as it was basically a metal part with a hole in it that needed to be tightened with something very stiff, but about the thickness of the metal of a regular screwdriver. I couldn't just drive home 50 kilometers like that. We were just about to give up, and put of nowhere, a guy with a massive backpack walks up to us. He asked us what we were trying to do and explained we didn't have the tool to fix the disconnect. He goes in his bag, grabs the exact tool I needed, and tightened it perfectly in seconds. We have it back to him and continued walking into the bush. We left and drove a few kilometers and didn't see any vehicles that he would have drove up in. To this day, I still have no idea what happened for a random person to appear and have the correct tool. Story 49. When I was about 11 or so on one of my dad's weekends, I woke in the middle of the night and had this terrible sense that something was wrong. I looked out the window at the moon clouds and just had this pit of wrongness in my stomach. Took me an hour plus to fall asleep. It was very uncommon for me to wake during the night too. Thought about it when I woke up, but dismissed it until about 9 a.m. when an aunt from my mom's side of the family arrived to tell us my mom and stepdad had been in a terrible motorcycle accident. Mom survived somehow. Took her a couple years to walk again. To this day, she has lots of issues from the accident. It was a tough period for the family, but especially for her. She lost her soulmate. Anyways, when I found out the news, I could not shake the memory of waking up in the middle of the night with that sense that something was wrong. I think about it occasionally. It's the only experience I've had that makes me wonder if human conscience is somehow connected to others, even over distance. Story 50. I have a very rare book. Like, there are few copies and there is no one to buy on the internet except on a used book website for around 300 reais. My book is completely destroyed, falling apart, and this book literally changed my life. It's about the occult, to clarify. As it's old, I went to a random print shop near work to see if they would restore it for me. To my surprise, no, they didn't do that. But the owner told me, I have this book. I bought it in the 80s, and I'm getting rid of it from my library. He gave me the book in new condition. What are the chances? I can't explain this coincidence. Story 51. I had a dream of a big horned mountain sheep, very vivid, the kind with the round horns that wrap around. The next day, driving through the mountains alone, I saw a big horned sheep on the side of the road. I pulled over to observe in my car. It looked exactly like the one in my dream. Unexplainable, but not exactly an exciting, life-changing event to care a lot about. Story 52. I worked at a doctor's office for a while. One day I was in the office by myself, so I locked up the office from the outside to go out to lunch. By the time I got to my car, the office key was gone. Not in my pockets or my purse or anywhere on the ground or still in the lock. Just straight up gone with very few possibilities as to what happened. I called my boss, the doctor, who got upset and sent me home for the day. Probably the most WTF lost item of my life. Answer: if you happen to still have that jacket and purse, inspect the lining. My husband smoked for many years before we got together. He constantly lost the standard Bic lighters, as is tradition. Well, after he quit, he found a small hole in the side lining of his heavy jacket pocket. While looking at the lining, he felt a strange shift in the coat. Turns out there were at least 6 lighters nestled in between the outer layer and the inner part. Maybe this mystery key has a similar fate. Story 53. I already shared one story, but I thought of another. This was back when I was in high school. The Sega Dreamcast had just come out, and I was at my friend's parents' house with 3 of our other friends playing NFL 2K in their family room. I was always into physical humor, purposely falling backwards in my chair, intentionally tripping over things, and making a spectacle of falling to the ground in a way that looked harmful but was not. Stuff like that. I don't remember exactly what, but something happened during the game that made me mad, and I leapt into the air, starting out as a vertical jump and rotating forward into being on all fours parallel to the ground. I'd done that same jump many times before for dramatic effect. The landing looks much more painful than it really is. But this particular time, I didn't fall straight down as the laws of physics would dictate. I just floated. I levitated there for a second before slowly drifting towards the floor and landing softly. All 4 of my friends just stared at me with a WTF 1,000-yard stare, and finally one asked, "You were in the air for so long. How did you do that?" I immediately tried a few more times to recreate it and could not. Ever since that day, I've had recurring dreams of being able to float. I've seen videos of athletes who jump straight up and push their arms and legs down at the apex to make it appear as if they're floating. Maybe I did something like that by complete accident, but to this day I can't explain it. Story 54. So there was this one night when I was home alone, just chilling and watching TV. Out of nowhere, I heard this faint music playing, like an old-timey piano tune. I thought maybe it was coming from outside, but when I checked, everything was silent. The weirdest part? The music seemed to be coming from inside the house, but I couldn't pinpoint where. It played for a few minutes and then just stopped. I never figured out where it came from, and it never happened again. It was like my own little ghost concert. Story 55. A few years ago, I received a text message from my dad that was a selfie of him standing in front of a school trophy case. My dad has never taken a selfie in his life and barely can work his phone. Oh no. He calls texts emails. I was at work and confused, but ignored. About an hour later, he asked me where I got the pic I sent him earlier. I asked him what pic, and he said of me standing in front of a trophy case. I never sent it to him. I never even saved it. His phone did not have it saved. Neither us or my mom had ever seen the picture before. A few months later, we are at my niece's Christmas concert at her school. We see the trophy case. Story 56. I can't put an explanation to this no matter how many times I think it over. But a few years back, I was working on a cattle ranch in southern Oregon, high desert region. The owner has this massive herd. Myself, another hand are out on the playa one night because coyotes had recently taken off a few calves. Usually the cows would start mooing whenever they got stressed out or felt in danger, so they're going at it all of a sudden, and we both split up to circle where a section of the herd is bunched up at. I remember slowly pushing through the brush and seeing a figure amongst the cows, and they're going absolutely batshit. I squat down to use my rifle scope to get a better look, and I can't quite make out this figure's features. But the minute I sight down on it, the cows all stop mooing. Not a peep, and I get this cold feeling inside like maybe I shouldn't be here. Backed off and walked back to the truck and met the other hand. Asked him about this mystery figure, and he'd never even seen it. It was like looking at pitch black darkness. When I sighted down on this figure, I can't explain what I saw that night. Story 57. I've never really properly written this out, but he'll give it a shot. My husband and I had an argument a few years ago. It was a bad one, but arguing isn't unusual for us. When my husband is very angry, he gives me the silent treatment. This time was no different. We were driving home, and when we got home, he went into the bedroom and shut the door behind him. Again, not unusual for him to take distance when angry. I try not to force him to interact in these circumstances because he needs time to unwind and reset before we can resolve things. At the time, I was usually decent at doing that, respecting space. I don't know what came over me. but suddenly I tried to open the bedroom door. It was locked, a clear sign he needed space. I went out onto the balcony and pried the sliding glass door open. The bedroom was empty, but the door to the bathroom was closed. I approached it, knocked on it. It didn't sound right. I knew in that moment he had hung himself. I still don't know how I got the door open. I don't know how I knew not to respect space this time. I don't know how I managed to not wait too long. I injured him getting that door open, busted ribs getting him down. He didn't have any permanent brain damage, but it was a while before he could communicate again, so I didn't know right away that I'd gotten there in time. I thought maybe it had been too long. Just because he was breathing again didn't mean he was okay. It wasn't just an attempt. He wanted to die that day. I was so grateful for so long that I had gotten to him in time, that I knew to get to him in that moment. How did I know? Oh no. Our marriage has not been a healthy or happy one for me. It's strange. We were so happy for the decade before. I feel glad I saved him, but I wonder if maybe I lost the good part of him then. Maybe I didn't save all of him. Maybe it's just the impact of the TB. But I can't explain how I knew or how I did it physically. I only know that he is mine and that I am meant to protect him, not so much from the world, but from himself. Story 58. I was riding home with my mom after work. My feet hurt, so I took my shoes off. When we finally got home, I went to put my shoes back on, and I couldn't find the other one. We finally decided to just retrace our steps to see if I had dropped it at my job's parking lot or something. On the way back, we saw it in a ditch on the side of the road. I knew it was mine because of the prescription insoles. Story 59. I was sitting in the tub and I must have been too young to speak because I started crying wildly until I was taken out. I stopped crying. Back into the tub. Same thing, but crying uncontrollably, so I was taken out. Pipes suddenly burst, spraying hot water where I was sitting. Story 60. I live in Washington and my elderly mom lived in Texas. We've been estranged for years. Very dysfunctional family, and it's complicated. And she would rarely answer the phone for me, or anyone else for that matter. Last January, I was dozing on the couch and was suddenly woken up by this really bad feeling that something was wrong with her. I couldn't get her to answer the phone, and as the day went on, the feeling just persisted. The next morning, when I still couldn't get in touch with her, I told my husband I just knew something was really wrong and that I was flying to Texas ASAP. He kind of blew me off about it and was understandably irritated that I was planning on buying last-minute tickets based on a feeling, but I insisted I was going and bought tickets to leave the next morning. While I was at the gate waiting to board, I got a call from an old friend of hers who lives in South Carolina and whom I haven't spoken to in years. He said, "C-Tex 1787, I have a really bad feeling about your mom. I think something is wrong with her, and I can't get her to answer her phone." Again, typical. "Have you talked to her recently?" I told him I had the same overwhelming feeling and was literally a few minutes from getting on the plane to Texas. This call in itself was so weird. When I got to her house, I found her hallucinating, and her lower legs and feet were a deep purple and very cold. I called 911, and she spent several days in the ICU, and then about 6 weeks in the hospital, and then medical rehab. Thank God they were able to save her legs because I really thought she was going to lose them. It turns out that when I found her, she was septic from a long untreated UTI, and medical staff told me she had been within a couple of days from passing. One thing I learned from this experience is if a UTI goes untreated, not only can you develop sepsis, which can result in the kind issues that developed in her legs and feet, but it can also cause major hallucinations and, of course, ultimately passing. Apparently, UTIs are a very common cause of passing in seniors. Another thing I learned through this is to not ignore very strong negative feelings. It may end up being nothing, but in this case, it was definitely something I'm glad I didn't just brush off. The whole thing was the weirdest, most unreal experience of my life. I'm not religious, but there was definitely something strange happening here. Answer: I was fighting with my ex-boyfriend at the time, right before we broke up. And there was one day I just had this strong, horrible feeling, like something bad was going to happen. He absolutely belittled me and my made-up feelings, like I was using it as a weapon against him or something. I found out a couple days later that my ex-fiancé had eliminated himself because he sent me a goodbye email. Story 61. Was at a party at a friend's house, had some drinks but didn't drink too excessively, crashed on their fairly tiny couch. So I was in a bit of a curled up position, woke up in the morning, sat up, and a few seconds later, and this huge wave of I don't know what hit me. I got nauseous, lightheaded, my body felt toxic, and I immediately got super hot and started sweating everywhere and collapsed onto the ground. I don't know how long I was down, maybe 2 minutes, but I was conscious the whole time. Just remember laying there for a minute thinking, oh, am I dying? And then I just got up and was fine. Answer: that's a pretty stereotypical reaction. sweating, nausea, something is wrong feeling, to decreased heart function, like from an actual attack, angina, or something else that would cause your blood pressure to drop all of a sudden. I can get a bit of that from sitting it up too fast sometimes, orthostatic hypotension. You might want to get that checked out eventually because you may have a PFO that hasn't been noticed yet. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.